My name is Winifred Absalom, and I have spent 83 years collecting dust, debts, and a particular kind of loneliness that doesn't announce itself at the door. It simply moves in and starts rearranging the furniture while you sleep. I was born in a crooked little town called Hatchery Falls, Tennessee, where the summer heat pressed down on the tobacco fields like a thumb on a bruise, and where the old Baptist church on Corrigan Road had a bell that never rang on time. My mother, Dessa Vane, used to say that God ran on his own clock in Hatchery Falls, and that any woman who tried to hurry him would end up breathless and bewildered. I did not understand what she meant until the morning they rolled me into the operating room at Mercyvale Regional Hospital on a gurney that squeaked like a wounded bird, and the anesthesiologist, a young man with the unfortunate name of Dr. Fletch Ulbricht, told me in a voice smoother than boiled custard that I was going to be just fine. I was not just fine. I want you to understand something about the weeks that led up to that operating table. There was nothing poetic about them. I had been ignoring a tightness in my chest for the better part of 6 months, chalking it up to grief. My husband, Cornelius Absalom, had died the previous November, 2 days before Thanksgiving, which meant that every year from then on, the smell of cornbread dressing would be knotted up with the image of him, cold and small, in that awful pewter casket. Cornelius had been a difficult man, the kind who loved you in the wrong direction, pushing where he should have pulled. But I had loved him the way you love a house that needs constant repair, with exhaustion and devotion in equal measure, never quite able to stop. After he passed, I stopped eating correctly. I ate things that came in cardboard boxes and required only the addition of hot water. My daughter, Marisol Teeple, she kept her first husband's name even after the divorce, out of spite, she said, though I suspect it was out of habit, called me every Sunday from her condo in Flagstaff and asked how I was doing, and I told her fine, just fine, which is the sentence old women use when they mean the opposite of fine, but cannot bear the consequences of honesty. The tightness in my chest became a pressure, and the pressure became a grinding, and the grinding became the kind of pain that makes you set down whatever you are holding, in my case, a mug of chamomile tea, and brace yourself against the kitchen counter and say out loud to no one in particular, "Well, there it is." The ambulance came. The paramedics were kind. One of them, a heavy-set young woman named Ruth Ann, held my hand in the back of the vehicle and told me her grandmother had gone through the same thing and was now line dancing in Scottsdale. I appreciated the lie. It had warmth in it. At Mercyvale, they discovered that 2 of my coronary arteries were blocked in a way that the cardiologist, Dr. Perpetua Osei, described as remarkably severe for someone who appears otherwise healthy. I took that as a backhanded compliment. Dr. Osei had a face shaped like an almond and eyes that held none of the performative cheerfulness I had come to expect from medical professionals. She looked at me as though I were a problem she genuinely intended to solve, which was more reassuring than any smile could have been. They scheduled emergency bypass surgery for the following morning. Marisol flew in from Flagstaff. She sat in the chair beside my hospital bed and held my hand the way I used to hold hers when she was small and afraid of the dark. And I thought, this is the geometry of love, how it rotates between people over a lifetime, passing back and forth like a baton in a relay race where no one ever quite crosses the finish line. I told her not to worry. She told me she wasn't worried. We were both lying, which meant we were communicating perfectly. The morning of the surgery arrived in the way that dreaded mornings always do, not with thunder or ceremony, but with ordinary light coming through ordinary blinds, making ordinary shadows on an ordinary floor. A nurse named Gretchen Palloway shaved a portion of my chest with the focused expression of a woman who has performed this task 10,000 times and intends to perform it 10,000 more. Dr. Fletch Ulbricht appeared with his custard voice and his clipboard and told me again that I was going to be just fine. I remember the ceiling tiles of the operating room. I remember the cold. I remember the lights, not the soft golden kind that people describe in near-death testimonies, but the harsh surgical kind, white and pitiless, the kind of light that does not flatter. I remember the beeping of monitors, then a sudden and absolute silence that was not the silence of sleep, but the silence of elsewhere. And then I was not in the operating room anymore. I am going to try to describe what I experienced with the precision it deserves, which means I am going to fail, because the language we have built for ordinary life does not stretch far enough to cover what I am about to tell you. It is like being asked to carry ocean water in a paper cup. The cup cannot hold it, and the effort of trying is its own kind of instruction. I was in a field, but that word, field, is inadequate in the way that the word music is inadequate to describe what Bach was doing when he wrote the Crab Canon, technically accurate and thoroughly insufficient. The field was made of light, but the light was not the flat radiance of the surgical lamps. It had texture and depth, like something woven rather than emitted, and it moved the way water moves when something large and benevolent is passing beneath the surface. I understood, in the way you understand things in dreams, not through reasoning but through absorption, that I had died. I was not afraid. This is the part I find most difficult to explain to people like Marisol, who is a rationalist in the way that dry wood is flammable, completely and at the first opportunity. I had been afraid of death my entire life, in the background way that you are afraid of earthquakes when you live in California, a persistent low-frequency dread that you learn to furnish your life around. And then I was dead, and the dread was simply gone, the way a tooth stops aching the moment it is pulled, and you wonder how you ever considered that ache normal. There was a presence in the field. I will call it a presence, because figure implies edges, and being implies something I understood, and I did not understand it. I only felt it, the way you feel the warmth of a fire through a window before you see the flame. The presence was not shaped exactly like anything, and yet I perceived it as having orientation, as facing me, as attending to me specifically, with the kind of full and undivided attention that no living person has ever given me in 83 years of being alive. It did not speak in words. This is the third thing I cannot explain. The communication happened the way temperature happens, not transmitted through a specific channel, but present everywhere at once, absorbed through whatever I was in that place, since I was clearly not my body. What I received was not a message in the grammatical sense, not subject and verb and object arranged on a line. It was more like a compression of meaning that unfolded as I held it, the way a paper crane unfolds into a flat square, and then, if you keep going, into nothing, into the paper itself, into the tree the paper came from, into the rain that fed the tree, into all of it at once. What I understood from the presence was this, that it loved every person who had ever lived with a love so specific and so total that the word love buckles under the weight of it. Not a general love, not the vague goodwill of a deity presiding over 7 billion interchangeable souls from an administrative distance, but a love that knew each person by their particular loneliness, by the specific shape of their grief, by the exact quality of their 3 a.m. darkness. And then, and this is the part that broke something open in me, something I did not even know was sealed. I understood that the presence was communicating something particular, something directed not only at me, but through me, something it wanted me to carry back. It was a message for Black people. I am a white woman from Hatchery Falls, Tennessee, born in 1941, in a county where the water fountains was still labeled well into my childhood, where the deacons at Corrigan Road Baptist would have called what I am about to tell you heretical, and where my own grandmother, Beulah Voss, used language at the dinner table that I am not going to repeat. I want you to understand the weight of that geography when I tell you what the presence communicated, because I want you to understand that this was not a message I would have expected or invented or been capable of manufacturing from the contents of my own small life. The message was grief, but not ordinary grief. It was grief on a scale I cannot hold in my mind even now, without my eyes filling up in a way that embarrasses me in grocery stores and doctors' waiting rooms and anywhere else that I have made the mistake of letting myself remember it. The presence grieved, there is no other word, grieved the specific suffering of Black people across generations, not as a historical footnote, not as a distant tragedy observed from the comfort of omnipotence, but as a wound that had not closed, a wound that was still being opened daily in ways large and surgical, and in ways so small they left no visible mark, and yet accumulated like water behind a dam. And alongside the grief, and this is what brought me to tears then, and brings me to tears now, as I sit in Marisol's kitchen in Flagstaff, using her good stationery to write this down. Alongside the grief was something that I can only describe as outrage. A righteous, burning outrage at every hand that had swung the lash and every mouth that had spoken the scripture that justified it, and every system built on stolen breath and stolen labor and stolen names, and this is what I was not prepared for. An outrage at the silence of those who watched and said nothing, who stood in the field and let the burning happen, because the burning was not happening to them. I understood in the field that indifference is not neutrality. I understood it the way you understand that a chair is hard when you fall from a height, not as a concept, but as a fact that enters the body. The presence communicated something else, too, and here my language phrase entirely becomes a rope with too many cut threads to hold weight. It communicated something like endurance recognized, something like, I have seen every year of it, every name, every unmarked grave, every child separated, every dream deferred past the point of deferral, every body that bore what no body should be asked to bear. And I have seen it with eyes that do not blink, and a heart that does not harden. And I am telling you, I am telling Winifred Absalom, a white woman from Tennessee who once crossed the street out of fear and shame and never fully forgave herself, that none of it has been invisible. None of it has been lost. Not one moment of dignity maintained under impossible conditions. Not one act of grace extended to someone who did not deserve it. Not one song sung in a field at night when singing was the only freedom left. None of it has been lost. I wept in the field. Whatever weeping means without a body, I did it. And then I was back. Dr. Ulbricht was saying my name, not Winifred, which is my name, but Mrs. Absalom, Mrs. Absalom, in the way that people call out to someone they are genuinely frightened they are losing. And I understood from the quality of his voice that something had happened on the table, that there had been a detour, a complication, a minute or minutes during which the monitors said nothing and the room held its breath. She's back, someone said. The ceiling tiles again, the pitiless lights. I lay there and thought about the field and the presence and the message and the grief that was bigger than the room and bigger than the hospital and bigger than Hatchery Falls and bigger, I think, than anything I am going to be able to contain in the rest of my remaining years, however many or few those turn out to be. The recovery was long. My sternum, which had been sawed open and then sealed back together with what Dr. Osei described as excellent closure, ached in a way that made every breath a small negotiation. Marisol stayed for 3 weeks. She made soups I had no appetite for, and watched old British procedurals with me late at night, and did not ask about what had happened on the table, which was exactly right of her. She has always known when to leave a door closed. I told her eventually. One evening, when the soup was finished and the procedural had reached a conclusion, and the flagstaff dark was pressing gently against the window glass like a cat asking to be let in. Marisol is a rationalist, as I have said. She listened without interrupting, which is not her natural inclination. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time, in the specific way that people are quiet when they are deciding whether to believe you or spare you. "Mom," she said finally. "I know," I said. "I'm not saying it didn't happen," she said. "I know," I said again. She reached over and took my hand, and we sat there in the kitchen with the light above the stove still on because neither of us had remembered to turn it off, and outside the window there was a cactus that Cornelius would have found disagreeable. He was a Tennessee man, a man of oaks and kudzu and persistent humidity. And I thought about how the field had been lit with something that was not the sun, and not electricity, and not anything I can point to in this world, and how despite everything I have been taught in 83 years about the nature of things, I believed every word of what the presence had given me, believed it the way I believe in the tightness that became a grinding, that became pain. Not because I chose to believe it, but because it was already inside me before I had the chance to decide. I have told this story many times since the surgery. I have told it at the First Methodist on Carver Street, where the congregation was mostly white and politely uncomfortable. I have told it at the community center on Delwood Avenue, where the congregation was mostly black and received it with a silence I could not read, but which did not feel like dismissal. I have told it at Marisol's dinner table to her partner Fenwick, who is a software architect, and who asked me, with genuine curiosity rather than hostility, whether I thought the experience could be attributed to anoxic brain events. I told him that it could, and that I did not believe it was. He nodded the way people nod when they have decided to let you have your thing. What I want to say, what I have been circling for all these pages, the way a hawk circles, not because it is lost, but because it is reading the ground, is this. I do not know what the field was. I do not know what the presence was, though I have a belief about it that I hold quietly, the way you hold a bird you are trying not to frighten. I do not know why a message for black people passed through a white woman from Hatchery Falls, Tennessee, who spent the first 40 years of her life failing spectacularly to be the person she should have been. I have theories, none of them satisfying. Maybe I was chosen because I was unexpected, because the message arriving through someone like me would be harder to dismiss as self-serving. Maybe I was chosen because the field does not work the way we think it works, and its logic is not the logic of deserving. Maybe I was not chosen at all, and the message passed through me the way wind passes through a screen door, because I was simply there and open, and the grief needed somewhere to go. What I know, what I carry back from that operating table, and will carry until the next time I go to the field and do not return, is that the grief was real. The love was real. The outrage was real. And the recognition, the deep, cellular, immovable recognition of every moment of endurance and grace and dignity and song was real. Winifred Absalom died on that table for 1 minute and 43 seconds, according to the surgical record. She came back with something she did not have before. She is trying, imperfectly, and with the tools of an 83-year-old woman from a crooked Tennessee town, to pass it on. Thousands have heard this story and said it changed them. You deserve to hear it too. Subscribe now, hit like, and tell us in the comments, what city are you listening from?